have low vision, or another print disability that makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult, if not impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org. The Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents a reading of articles and features from USA Today for Thursday, July the 2nd, 2026. Your readers today,
Jim Duffy
and Ken Drost. And opening with the primary section, heat wave to leave millions sweltering during holiday. Dangerous forecast may top temperature records. The article written by Doyle Rice begins, "The heat is on. A prolonged dangerous heat wave will continue to intensify across most of central to eastern United States into the 4th of July weekend, with both smothering humidity and searing heights that could approach records in the mid-Atlantic. So far, the heat has forced the cancellation of outdoor activities, such as summer camps and communities to open cooling centers. Overall, about 230 million people, or roughly 2/3 of the U.S. population, could be exposed to extreme heat this week, Weather.com has warned. The extreme heat will peak Tuesday, June the 30th, through Thursday, July the 2nd, in the Midwest and Mississippi Valley, shifting eastward into the Ohio Valley and East Coast, Thursday, July 2nd, and into the weekend, the National Weather Service said in an online forecast. The heat wave will bring the hottest weather so far this year for many, and in some cases the worst in years, according to AccuWeather meteorologist Alex Sosnowski. How hot will it get? In the Midwest, Weather.com forecasts that highs in the 90s are going to stretch as far as northern Michigan and northern Wisconsin, with heat indices reaching triple-digit values in cities like Milwaukee, Chicago, St. Louis, and Minneapolis. The Mid-Atlantic is forecast to see dangerous heat indices of 100 degrees to 110 degrees in Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, Richmond, Virginia, with possible triple-digit temperatures lasting several days. Washington, D.C., New York City, and Boston could each hit 100 degrees by July 2nd, and overnight lows in parts of the Mid-Atlantic may remain above 80, Weather.com said. Parts of the Interstate 95 corridor from southern New England to northern Virginia could reach triple-digit highs each afternoon from July 2nd through the 4th. This could flirt with temperature records in a few places, including Philadelphia's record high of 106 degrees, August 7th, 1918. The extreme heat and humidity are expected to bring near record or possibly record energy usage to the Mid-Atlantic power providers. This is especially critical on Thursday, July the 2nd, as some companies could see possible power cuts just to stabilize the grid. Elsewhere, the South will continue to experience 90-plus highs, and some locations in the Southern Plains and the Southeast could exceed 100 degrees, with humidity pushing heat indices over 100 degrees from Texas all the way up to the Carolinas. The heat is going to bring significant danger not only for young people, the elderly, and those with fragile respiratory and cardiovascular conditions, according to AccuWeather Sosnowski, but also anybody who will be undertaking manual labor or rigorous physical activity. Experts urge people to take breaks from the heat, seek shade, remain hydrated, as the risk of heat exhaustion and heart and heat stroke will be much higher during this prolonged and dangerous heat wave than on any typical summer day. Friends, family members, and neighbors are encouraged to check in regularly on the elderly who may attempt to isolate themselves from the heat by shutting their windows without air conditioning. Hurricane forecasters have been tracking a weak area of low pressure off the southeast coast this week for possible tropical development. The low pressure system will get trapped under the high pressure heat dome centered over the Ohio Valley this week, which will nudge it slowly back toward the southeastern U.S. and in the direction of coastal Georgia and South Carolina from late July 2nd until the 4th. At that point, however, the combination of increasing wind shear and very dry continental air will wash out the system, and it won't pose any significant issues for the July 4th holiday, according to Lowry in an email to USA Today. Elsewhere, the Atlantic should stay dormant for at least the first half of July, he said.
Birthright loss a blow to Trump crackdown, but millions feel impact of his immigration wins. From Bart Jansen of USA Today. President Trump lost at the Supreme Court on his top goal of restricting birthright citizenship, but he has cracked down on immigration through hundreds of policy changes that have affected millions of people, changes that have largely been supported by federal courts. Key decisions in the closing weeks of the Supreme Court's term confirmed 3 Trump policies. One allowed him to end a humanitarian program for Haitians and Syrians living temporarily in the country. Another allowed him to turn away refugees seeking asylum at the border. A third allowed more scrutiny of green card holders returning from abroad. The 3 rulings from the Supreme Court this week are all victories for enforcing our nation's immigration laws, Homeland Security Secretary Markwayne Mullin said on social media June 25th. These decisions give us the tools we need to continue securing our nation. Courts have traditionally given presidential administrations of both parties wide discretion over immigration policy, according to immigration law experts. I think that with these last decisions ruling in favor of the Trump administration on his immigration policies, it seems very clear that the court is going to give very wide and broad deference to the Trump administration's mass deportation agenda. Nicole Hallett, a University of Chicago law professor and director of the Immigrants' Rights Clinic, told USA Today. Although immigration law experts said Trump's loss on birthright citizenship was expected, they said the issue's constitutional importance outweighed the administration's victories in other immigration cases. Trump sought to limit the long-standing constitutional principle enshrined in the 14th Amendment in 1868 and upheld by the Supreme Court in 1898, that those born in the United States are citizens. It doesn't stack up against the other immigration cases. It was not a close case, Amanda Frost, a University of Virginia law professor and director of Migration and Human Rights Program, told USA Today. It's basically that they lost the one that everyone thought they absolutely had no grounds to even to bring. The court's decisions since Trump's election have shown a spotlight on an immigration system that many on all sides of the debate call broken, and Trump's extensive use of executive power to close America's southern border. Yale Lohr, the retired Cornell professor, said the Trump administration changed more than 700 immigration policies with a striking scope. The lower courts have been much more vigorous in rejecting some of Trump's immigration policies, Yale Lohr said, but when those cases have percolated up to the Supreme Court has often overturned those lower court decisions and allowed the policies to go ahead in restricting immigration. After the recent Supreme Court victories, the White House promoted 60 policies as part of Trump's crackdown on illegal immigration. Legal experts say the court rulings highlight how the Trump administration changed policies in the absence of Congress updating immigration law. Work permit levels for TPS were set in 1990, and the complex method for determining whether someone qualifies for asylum was codified in 1996. We desperately need Congress to step in and legislate in this area and try to fix this broken system, according to Hallett. That was also Trump's takeaway after the June 30th birthright decision. He urged Congress to pass legislation adopting his proposed citizenship restrictions, after Kavanaugh wrote that the Constitution would not stand in the way. Kavanaugh was part of a 6-3 majority that overturned Trump's executive order restricting citizenship, but not part of the 5-4 majority that said the 14th Amendment ensured citizenship for everyone born in the country. No long and unwieldy constitutional amendment is necessary, Trump wrote on social media. Congress should start today to work on ending expensive and unfair to our country birthright citizenship.
Young cadets live their Jack Sparrow dreams. Carissa Waddick of USA Today writes this feature. Aboard the USCGC Eagle, 24 sailors balanced on ropes hanging high above the ship, their bodies swaying in the wind. The U.S. Navy's Blue Angels buzzed the masts. Whistling and cheering crowds gathered on the dock below. The Coast Guard cutter Eagle eased into Baltimore's inner harbor. On board, the crew prepared to thrust heaving lines over the white hull of this historic 295-foot behemoth. They had spent hours over the past 3 days washing, painting, and cleaning the deck to prepare it for guests. Some had been up since 3 a.m. Known as America's tall ship, Eagle is on a weeks-long journey up the East Coast for Sail 250, an international maritime celebration commemorating the anniversary of the country's founding. The festivities will culminate July 4th, when vessels and aircraft from 46 countries converge in New York City for what organizers say will be the largest maritime and aerial gathering in U.S. history. With their billowing sails, teakwood decks, and mazes of ropes and rigging, ships like Eagle draw throngs of visitors hoping to get a glimpse of the past. Today, Eagle and its international counterparts are primarily used as training vessels. The ship teaches things the old way, its commanding officer, Captain Christopher Ensley, likes to say. For the past 80 years, every United States Coast Guard Academy cadet has hopped aboard Eagle. They navigate by the stars, hoist sails, and literally learn the ropes of this nearly 100-year-old ship, work largely invisible to those who come aboard for brief tours. With Eagle's journey this summer, we are honoring the previous 250 years of service while also bridging to the future with these young men and women on board, Ensley said. Now, USA Today spent 4 days aboard the Eagle on its voyage from Norfolk, Virginia, to Baltimore for a first-hand look at life on a tall ship and what it reveals about the nation's past and its future. Sitting at a wooden table in the crowded mess hall below deck, Emily Pavlak said she's living out her Jack Sparrow dreams. That's a reference to the wily protagonist in Disney's Pirates of the Caribbean film series. Pavlak is one of about 150 Coast Guard cadets training on Eagle for the second half of the summer. She's sailing the ship alongside about 60 enlisted crew members and a handful of officers through the duration of Sail 250 festivities. A half dozen of her classmates stood around a stainless steel table in the kitchen, cutting carrots, peeling beets. They were blasting Escape, the Pina Colada song. It was 7 a.m. I'm not feeling super well rested, but that's part of the fun, Pavlak said, as she placed her blue breakfast tray on the table and settled onto a cushioned bench. She had stood watch until midnight as the ship navigated from Norfolk and out of the Chesapeake Bay. From the deck, Pavlak could see lightning illuminating the coastline like a fireworks show. She felt the boat rocking back and forth in the roughening waters. The churn of the sea intensified the smell of seaweed. Eagle avoided the brunt of the storm as the crew navigated toward open ocean. And when Pavlak awoke, the next day, the sun was high in the sky, and the ocean was the color of dark blue Gatorade. Tired or not, it was time for a full day of training. The age of sail, when pirates like Johnny Depp's fictional Jack Sparrow roamed the seven seas, ended about 200 years ago. Nowadays, Eagle is the only active duty sailing vessel in the United States military, according to the Coast Guard. You're listening to a reading of today's USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 12:15. Continuing, most of the Coast Guard's fleet is powered by diesel and gas. The Academy still uses the Eagle to train new sailors, Ensley said, to build sweat equity and teach lessons on teamwork and leadership. Gripping a stainless steel coffee thermos, Ensley stood on the backside of the ship near its navigation bridge and monitored cadets as they prepared to set the sails. One of the crew members yelled, "Let fall!" and cadets teetering on narrow foot ropes began unfurling strings, holding the white sails. The crew called out, "Sheet home," and a dozen more cadets standing in a line below thrust their bodies back and forth in rhythm, chanting, "Heave ho!" Hand over hand, they pulled the ropes to maneuver the sail, and then worked rigging to lift the more than 3,000-pound upper topsail yard into place. Eagle's interior walls tell its story. Photos of it as a German naval boat during World War II dangle between portholes in the wardroom, where officers gather to eat. The black and white snapshots of sailors hoisting lines on deck look very similar to the modern scene still playing out today. Yet most who board the ship say it is far removed from those days. Originally named Horst Wessel after a Nazi Party member, it was built in 1936 to train German Navy cadets. Adolf Hitler stepped aboard when it first launched out the shipyard. A portrait of him hung in the flag cabin. When the Allied powers prevailed in World War II, the United States took the ship as a war prize. Since 1946, it has operated as a training vessel out of New London, Connecticut. Hitler's picture was exchanged for a painting of Alexander Hamilton, the father of our Coast Guard. First-class cadet Cole Miller has found the ship's history intriguing. "It shows the evolution of things in some ways," said Miller, who was aboard for 11 weeks this summer. "It's always been a symbol. For many Americans, tall ships call to mind images of explorers and colonists sailing to the New World. For others, they serve as reminders of a darker history when millions of captive Africans were crammed into squalid cargo holds and transported to ports where they were sold into slavery. American author Alex Haley chronicled the horrors of the Middle Passage in his 1976 novel Roots, the saga of an American family, part of which he wrote aboard the Eagle. Haley enlisted in the Coast Guard at 17 and retired as its chief journalist in 1959. When he was writing his Pulitzer Prize-winning book years later, Haley asked to sail for a week as a guest aboard the Eagle. He isolated himself in his room and is said to have gone below deck to understand some of what his enslaved ancestors might have experienced. Unlike the posh flag cabin Haley was assigned to sleep in, the bilge at the bottom of the ship typically fills with water and mosquitoes. When it published, Haley's book offered an alternative narrative to the country's uber-patriotic bicentennial celebrations and forced Americans to reconcile with the brutality of slavery. A plaque recognizing Haley now hangs outside the flag cabin, near where the portrait of Hitler used to be displayed. Ensley said, "It's important for cadets not to forget the past. Being true to who we are, what we are, our history. Frankly, that's part of what the ship is." The tiger maple wood wall paneling in the flag cabin is among the few original pieces of Eagle that's still left. Despite how it looks on the outside, much of the ship is remarkably modern. Air conditioning keeps the cabins cool on hot summer days at sea. Freshwater showers mean the sweaty smells of young adults doing manual labor never gets too intense. Laundry machines hum below deck, cycling through salt-stiffened uniforms. The ship's engine propels the vessel when wind conditions are poor, giving the crew more control over its port schedule. But above deck, Eagle operates much as it has for the past 90 years. As the ship navigated back into the Chesapeake Bay for its journey to Baltimore, First Class Cadet Levi Edmonds taught some younger students how to navigate just using pen and paper. Pressed against the ship's railing, excuse me, the sailors spotted a lighthouse and a water tower through binoculars. The three-person team then found the corresponding symbols on the paper chart. Using a compass, they calculated the ship's exact location. "Oh, it's very intense," Edmonds said. "Every 3 minutes you need to report what you saw." It's also a lost art. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration sunset printing in nautical charts in 2024. "Much like your grandmother's Volkswagen," Ensley said, "the ship does not have power steering. To turn the rudder, 6 cadets must man 3 massive wheels made out of wood and copper. Other cadets stand nearby, tracking the wind and the sea conditions. People get really frustrated. It's so cumbersome," said Chief Petty Officer Rob Lester, who was instructing cadets handling ropes. The boat was literally designed by a German engineer to be as arduous as possible. "It's just a big excuse to get all these young people in positions to be scared and to fail." Standing on the edge of the ship and looking out at the choppy water, First Class Cadet Carries Ray said, "The hard work running a tall ship comes with moments of magic and levity." She and others aboard said they had trauma bonded with many of their fellow crewmates. When all you have is complete darkness, you have the stars, and they're gorgeous, and you're just sitting together to stay awake. You just become vulnerable, Ray said. Miller, one of the other cadets, sat on a bench on the rear of the ship one afternoon as hundreds of dolphins crusted above the waves. From a distance, they looked like small white dots. As they leaped into the air, Miller got a glimpse of the blowholes, their friendly eyes, and the sharp points of their fins. Their white bellies looked aqua-colored as they glided back beneath the water. The pod of dolphins swam along the edges of the boat for more than 30 minutes. Miller hadn't been enthusiastic about coming aboard Eagle for the summer. A rising senior, he had already sailed on the ship as a young cadet and had hoped for a new experience. But as he stared at the dolphins, Miller said he realized he needed to be on that sailing vessel. This can't ever get old.
Centrist and socialist both win in Colorado. Takeaways from the Democratic primary. From Philip M. Bailey of USA Today. Democrats' generational and ideological tug-of-war continued to unfold in the June 30th Colorado primary amid a national anti-establishment surge that has emboldened the younger, more progressive contenders. In a congressional race for the district covering Denver, longtime Representative Diana DeGette, 68, was upset by political newcomer Malad Quiros, 29, who identifies as a Democratic socialist. And in a key swing congressional district, State Representative Manny Rutnell, a progressive, beat a more moderate opponent to win the Democratic nomination. "Fundamental change can and will happen if we fight for it," Quiros said in a fiery June 30th victory speech. "If we organize and show no fear in standing up for what's right, that is the message that Denver has sent to both parties, to Donald Trump and to the entire country." But statewide, U.S. Senator John Hickenlooper, 74, held off a challenge from State Senator Julie Gonzalez, who was 43, who ran to the incumbent's left and argued that it was time for a new voice in Washington. Polls show Democrats are the favorites to retake Congress heading into November, but the party is engulfed at the moment by a fierce debate about its ideological direction. Some veteran party figures are rejecting the socialist insurgency, as New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani's preferred candidates swept Democratic congressional primaries in several very liberal districts on June 23rd, while centrist candidates have recently won statewide contests, such as 2025's New Jersey and Virginia governor's races. In Colorado, Senator Michael Bennet also suffered an upset at the hands of State Attorney General Phil Weiser in the gubernatorial primary. Like many Democratic primaries in 2026, That campaign was less defined by sharp policy disagreements than a contest over who would more effectively oppose the Trump administration's staunchly conservative policy agenda and its aggressive actions. Key takeaways from the Colorado primary. Quiros upsets longtime Democrat in a deep blue district. Progressives aligned with the Democratic Socialists of America continued their national winning streak in the midterms by ousting another veteran lawmaker in a deep blue area. DeGette was first elected in 1996, a year before Quiros was born, in a district that former Vice President Kamala Harris won by 56 percentage points in 2024. The Congresswoman stressed her relationships on Capitol Hill and her opposition to Trump. She was among the group of House Democrats who skipped Trump's 2026 State of the Union address in protest. But that wasn't enough to stave off Quiros, who campaigned on concerns often cited by younger and more progressive Democrats, including the rise of artificial intelligence and Israel's alleged war crimes in Gaza. Quiros first gained online notoriety after being fired by her New York law firm in November of 2023 for writing a letter sharply critical of Israel. The outcome is bound to escalate an internal Democratic debate that has been growing since Mondami's win in New York City. Democratic Socialists have pulled off upsets in major cities such as Washington, D.C. and Seattle and liberal-leaning congressional districts, but they have attracted criticism from some in the party's centrist wing, who say farther left candidates and their policies are an anathema in swing states and districts. A Pew Research Center survey released in January, for example, found 32% of Democratic voters like leaders who describe themselves as Democratic Socialists versus 11% who disliked the term. For much of 2025, the gripe among rank-and-file Democrats was that their leaders in Washington were not doing enough to resist the returning Trump administration's bulldozing agenda. That appears to be what gave Weiser the edge to defeat Bennet in what started as an uphill battle due largely to name recognition. In 2025, polls showed Bennet, a three-term senator, leading the primary by as much as 31 percentage points. But Weiser closed the fundraising gap, raising a record more than $6.5 million versus the $4.8 million Bennet raised. Weiser made much of the campaign about fighting back against Trump, who was deeply unpopular in the state. The anti-Trump sentiment was inflamed further when Governor Jared Polis, the Democratic incumbent, commuted a 9-year prison sentence for Tina Peters, a former county clerk convicted of letting someone access data from a secure voting system. Trump had demanded Peters' release and threatened to withhold federal funds from Colorado if his demand was not met. Peters, a Republican, was attempting to prove Trump's baseless claims about fraud in the 2020 presidential election. Polis was censured by the Colorado Democratic Party in May as a result of his decision to let Peters out of prison. Both Weiser and Bennet criticized Polis' decision, and Bennet promised that if he won the election, he would hold his Senate seat until taking office, rather than allowing Polis to fill the vacancy. But Weiser distinguished himself with primary voters by noting he has sued the president 66 times. He also called out Bennet, a moderate known for bipartisanship, for supporting parts of the president's agenda, such as voting to confirm at least 8 of Trump's cabinet nominees. If centrists are looking for a sign that their breed of Democrat can withstand the blue wave, it was in Colorado's Senate race, which turned into a generational referendum. Incumbent Hickenlooper, a former Colorado governor and Denver mayor, fended off Gonzalez with a decisive win. Gonzalez ran with a platform decisively to the left, supporting Medicare for all, raising the minimum wage, and cracking down on junk fees. She said younger voices are needed on Capitol Hill, a theme in many 2026 Democratic primaries. Hickenlooper will face the Republican Mark Baisley, who ran unopposed in the GOP primary, but experts give Republicans very little chance of flipping the Senate seat this fall, noting that the state has been trending heavily Democratic over the past decade.
You're listening to a reading of today's USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is now 12:30. Judge strikes down Pentagon press escort requirement. The policy raised First Amendment questions. Brianna J. Frank of USA Today writes this brief article. A federal judge on June 30 blocked the Pentagon from enforcing its policy requiring journalists to be escorted through the premises at all times. In his opinion, U.S. District Judge Paul Friedman said, the country's founders believed that the nation's security requires a free press and informed people, and that such security is endangered by governmental suppression of political speech. As our country celebrates its 250th anniversary this very week, that principle must not be abandoned now, he wrote. The legal battle started when the Pentagon implemented a press policy in October of last year that said journalists who solicit information not approved for public release could lose press access to the building. Experts told USA Today at the time the policy raised First Amendment questions, but said courts would ultimately have to decide if the policy was unconstitutional. The New York Times first sued over the matter in December. Friedman blocked the Pentagon from implementing the policy in March, which prompted the Department of War, formerly the Department of Defense, to establish an interim policy that shuttered journalists' long-time workspace and required the press to be escorted through the building. Pentagon spokesperson Sean Parnell said at the time that a new and improved press workspace will be established in an annex facility outside the Pentagon, but still on Pentagon grounds, and will be available when ready. Press freedom groups condemned the revamped policy and accused the Pentagon of violating the judge's order. Friedman concurred in an April 9 ruling, saying the Pentagon invoked slightly different language to achieve that same unconstitutional result. The New York Times filed a second lawsuit in May, saying the escort requirement was unreasonable because it imposes significant burdens on reporters' news gathering and wholly unnecessary in view of the long history and tradition of unescorted press access. Friedman wrote in his June 30th opinion that the New York Times was likely to succeed in arguing that the escort requirement violates the First Amendment, in part through being retaliatory. He said Pentagon officials' public statements about mainstream news outlets, including Secretary Pete Hegseth's remark comparing what he called the legacy Trump-hating press to biblical Pharisees, are powerful evidence of the department's retaliatory motive in implementing the policy. Parnell said the Pentagon would appeal the decision in a June 30 post on X. Unescorted access to the Pentagon allowed journalists to observe activity patterns and develop relationships that contributed to repeated unauthorized disclosures of operational plans and intelligence, he said. The court's orders effectively restores that risky environment at a time when protecting our military secrets is more critical than ever. Now, New York Times spokesperson Charlie Statlander said Friedman's order reaffirms the First Amendment rights of the press to cover the Pentagon without restrictions designed to prevent the public from knowing what the military is doing. We are pleased that the district court has once again put a stop to the department's continued unconstitutional efforts to restrict independent reporting about the Pentagon. This from Theodore J. Boutros, Jr. of Gibson Dunn, the law firm representing the New York Times in the case. The department's interim policy, including its escort requirement, is exactly what the district court found it to be: retaliation against the Times for exercising its First Amendment rights.
Trump made over $1.4 billion in income from cryptocurrency. Filings, digital assets dwarf other ventures. From Thao Nguyen of USA Today. President Trump reported more than $1.4 billion in income tied to his family's cryptocurrency ventures in 2025, making digital assets the largest driver of his earnings, according to an annual financial disclosure released on June 30th. The 927-page report, released by the U.S. Office of Government Ethics, provides the most detailed look yet at Trump's finances during his first year back in the White House. His crypto-related income dwarfed earnings reported by many of his traditional businesses and marked a sharp increase from past disclosures. In his disclosure for 2024, Trump reported more than $600 million in income from cryptocurrencies, golf properties, licensing, and other ventures. The latest filing showed that his companies received nearly $800 million from World Liberty Financial, a crypto company Trump co-founded with his sons, including more than $520 million from token sales and over $250 million from the sale of interests in the business. Income from World Liberty token sales alone increased more than ninefold from a year earlier, when Trump reported $57.35 million from the venture. The president also reported another $635 million from sales of his meme coins. Reuters estimated that the Trump family has generated at least $2.3 billion from crypto-related projects since Trump's return to the White House in 2025. The annual filing comes as the Trump administration has pursued policies viewed as favorable to the cryptocurrency industry, including advancing stablecoin regulations and scaling back some enforcement activity by federal regulators. Even with cryptocurrency accounting for the largest share of Trump's earnings, he continued to earn substantial income from his golf and resort businesses. Revenue from golf and resort properties exceeded $500 million in 2025, rising about 15% from the previous year, according to the filing. Revenue at Mar-a-Lago and Palm Beach, Florida, rose to $77 million from roughly $50 million in 2024, the filing shows. Revenue at Trump's Golf Club in nearby West Palm Beach increased 27%. But not all his hospitality properties posted gains. In 2025, revenue declined at Trump's Los Angeles golf course, according to the filing. Trump's income from his real estate interests, the business in which he made his name, had less spectacular growth, according to Reuters. The president reported income from about a dozen major commercial real estate ventures, most of them stakes in properties he developed or acquired decades ago. While the filing lists income ranges rather than specific rental revenue for properties such as Trump Tower in New York, most of those holdings reported income that was unchanged from or below the ranges Trump disclosed a decade earlier. Beyond crypto and hospitality operations, Trump reported more than $80 million in income from settlements with several media companies. The filing also showed $52 million in income from licensing arrangements that allow overseas developers to use the Trump name on real estate projects. Reuters said those earnings were driven largely by partnerships in the Middle East. The filing also confirms that Trump remains the beneficiary of the assets in the trust that ultimately receives the income. The White House previously said the president's business interests are overseen by his children. Additionally, the filing disclosed earnings by First Lady Melania Trump. According to the report, she received more than $10 million from a license agreement for her self-titled documentary film, Melania, over $6 million from another license agreement for the sale of NFTs and other collectibles, and about $521,000 in proceeds connected to her memoir.
A judge strikes down the Pentagon. Oh, I'm sorry, we already did that one. GOP lawmaker explains his 4-month absence. Zachary Shermill of USA Today writes, after 4 months away from his taxpayer-funded job in Congress, Representative Thomas Kean Jr. finally revealed the reason behind his absence. In a June 30 speech on the floor of the House of Representatives, the Republican lawmaker said he was hospitalized several months ago and diagnosed with depression. He said his doctors recommended that he remain hospitalized and explained it would be the fastest way to recover. Asking for help is not a weakness, he said. It is a strength. Cain did not offer more specific details about his hospitalization. He said that many people don't fully appreciate the severity of depression, one of the most common mental health disorders affecting millions of Americans. The depression rate among U.S. adults has remained at historic highs in recent years, sitting at more than 18% in the most recent Gallup poll. Until you experience it yourself, it's difficult to fully understand how powerful this illness can be, Cain said. The congressman who represents the New Jersey's 7th Congressional District and is the son of former Garden State Governor missed more than 140 votes since March. USA Today's repeated attempts to reach him during his absence were not successful. Like many people, I believed that I could simply push through, he said. But I agreed to follow my doctor's recommendations. The lawmaker is facing a tough general election in November. The nonpartisan Cook Political Report shifted its outlook last November for the race from Republican to a toss-up. The Democrat running to replace him, former Navy helicopter pilot Rebecca Bennett, has already hammered his voting record. So has the National Democratic Party. Career politician Tom Kean Jr. has never been more vulnerable, Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee spokesperson Eli Cousins said in a May statement. Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson, who was in touch with Kean during his absence, has consistently defended the congressman. The GOP leader said he hoped Kean's speech about his health condition would help clarify his absence. If it were me, I would have been more specific about that, and I encouraged him to be, Johnson said. It will be understandable to you.
Turning to the money section of USA Today, Medicare will pay for popular weight loss drugs. Millions could qualify for Wegovy and Zepbound use, from Ken Alltucker of USA Today. Millions of older adults could soon qualify for popular GLP-1 weight loss drugs such as Wegovy and Zepbound under a Medicare pilot program. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services has launched the Medicare GLP-1 Bridge program for enrollees who qualify for prescription weight loss medication based on height, weight, and other criteria. Older adults who get the medications will pay a monthly $50 copay, and Medicare will cover the rest. The Bridge program is a significant change because Medicare, the federal health program mainly for adults 65 and older, has been prohibited from covering weight loss medications, including GLP-1s. The Bridge program will run through the end of 2027. The program could help older adults afford the popular medication sought by many, despite list prices that can exceed $1,000 and spotty insurance coverage. Although drug makers have cut prices for cash-paying customers, more than half of adults on GLP-1 say the drugs have been difficult to afford, according to KFF, a health policy nonprofit. KFF said 9% of adults 65 and older use GLP-1s. Use was slightly higher for young adults. Medicare's Bridge program comes as companies that provide health insurance for most working-age adults are cutting back coverage. A survey from Mercer, a consultant, published June 11th, found about 6% of large employers will drop coverage of GLP-1 weight loss drugs in 2026, and another 5% plan to drop coverage in 2027. Nearly half of large employers covered the weight loss drugs in 2025. Employees who pay for insurance benefits have seen their costs continue to rise, said Raymond Brown, Mercer's North American Clinical Pharmacy leader. If employers don't want to drop coverage of the popular and expensive medications, they might add extra requirements for employees, such as regularly checking in with a weight loss coach. Employers are asking, can I continue to manage these costs, according to Brown? Who will be eligible for Medicare's GLP-1 coverage? Medicare beneficiaries must have prescription drug coverage known as Part D to be eligible for the medications. People must get a prescription from a doctor, or other licensed prescriber, and they will be subject to prior authorization. Not everyone will qualify for the program. You must be eligible for anti-obesity drugs based on your body mass index, which is a measure of height and weight. Those with a BMI of 35 or higher will generally qualify. Some with a BMI of 27 or higher will qualify if they have other medical conditions, such as prediabetes or peripheral artery disease.
You're listening to a reading of today's USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 12:45.
Continuing, Medicare recipients who already get GLP-1 drugs because of type 2 diabetes, sleep apnea, or heart disease risk won't get the medication under the Bridge program. They will continue to get the medications through their regular Part D prescription drug coverage. Although Medicare recipients must have a Part D plan to qualify for GLP-1s under the Bridge program, the private insurers that administer Part D plans won't be involved in the Bridge program. Medicare will handle approvals, process claims, and pay pharmacies, according to Medicare Rights Center. Medicare hasn't released an estimate of how many Americans might qualify for the anti-obesity drugs under the program. Based on 2020 data, KFF estimated about 13.7 million Medicare recipients either had obesity or were overweight. Which drugs will be covered under Medicare? Novo Nordisk's Wegovy, which is available as a shot in a pill, will be covered under the program. Eli Lilly's KwikPen version of the injectable Zepbound and the drug maker's weight loss pill Foundayo will qualify for the program. Novo and Lilly have sought to outmaneuver one another with price cuts for cash-paying customers whose insurance plans don't cover the medications. Novo has dropped the price for injectable Wegovy and most dosages of the diabetes drug Ozempic to $349 a month, down from $499 for consumers who purchase the medication directly from the drug maker, telehealth partners, or retail pharmacies. Lilly also cut prices for consumers who directly purchase Zepbound.
Experts say the central bank's independence concerns ease for now. Cook ruling gives Fed some breathing room. Rachel Barber of USA Today writes, the Supreme Court ruled 5-4 on June 29 that Donald Trump cannot fire Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook. That's a decision seen as a loss for a president who has tried to influence the central bank and a win for the institution's independence. The court said Cook can remain on the central bank's board of governors while she challenges Trump's ability to dismiss her. Now that means lower courts will continue to debate whether Trump has cause to remove Cook, but Trump cannot dismiss her outright while the process plays out. I am grateful for this decision, not for my own sake, but for the sake of the American people, whose economic well-being depends on a central bank that answers to its mission, not political intimidation, Cook said in a statement after the ruling. For as long as I serve at the Fed Reserve, I will continue to uphold the principles of political independence in service to all Americans. Now, Trump has consistently called on the Fed policymakers to lower its benchmark for interest rates, aiming to stimulate the economy, an issue with which he struggled to win favorability with voters in his second term. The Fed typically lowers borrowing costs to help boost the labor market and raises them to stabilize prices. After 3 months of solid job growth and rising inflation, there is growing consensus among Fed policymakers for a hike later this year. Now, Trump attempted to fire Cook last August after she voted alongside most of her colleagues to hold the benchmark rate steady at their first 5 meetings of 2025. He said the decision was based on allegations she committed fraud by lying on 2 home mortgage applications in 2021, not her votes on interest rates. Following the decision, Trump took to Truth Social, saying the Supreme Court sent back the case on a strictly procedural basis. He added his administration will take appropriate action immediately to make sure that someone who committed wrongdoing will not be making vital decisions concerning the welfare of the United States of America. Now, Cook has denied any wrongdoing. Several economists, legal experts, and Cook all said they felt her attempted termination was motivated by the president's desire to influence monetary policy. In January, then Fed Chair Jerome Powell called it perhaps the most important legal case in the Fed's history. While the ruling remains, Cook will be allowed to continue serving on the Fed's Board of Governors. Fighting the case cost nearly $1.2 million in legal service payments. Two nonprofits, the State Democracy Defenders Fund and Cantina Impact, covered most of the payments, according to a filing made public by the U.S. Office of Government Ethics. Former President Joe Biden first appointed Cook to the board in 2022 to fill an unexpired term, making her the first black woman to serve in the role. He reappointed her to the board the following year. Her term does not expire until January of 2038. I have no idea why they went after Lisa Cook, although I would guess that they didn't just look at Lisa Cook. Mike Scordelis, head of the U.S. Economics at Truist, said, "I think they were just looking for any way that they could tip the votes in their direction." Why it was Lisa Cook as opposed to Fed Governor Chris Waller? Well, maybe Chris Waller didn't get a mortgage recently, or didn't have anything that was even remotely something that they could have come after. The 1913 Federal Reserve Act allows the president to remove a Fed official for cause, although Trump is the first to formally try. Chief Justice John Roberts delivered the court's majority opinion, writing that to agree with the Trump administration's arguments would in effect transform the Federal Reserve's for-cause protection for Fed officials into at-will employment, an interpretive leap out of step with the statute Congress enacted and our nation's tradition of central banking protected from political interference. So, does Lisa Cook want lower interest rates? Well, as a Fed governor, Cook serves on the Federal Open Market Committee, which is responsible for setting the federal funds rate, a benchmark for interest rates around the country. She voted alongside most of her colleagues to cut rates 3 times last year in response to U.S. employers' historically low hiring. Now, although Cook is generally seen as a dove, somebody who supports typically lower rates, she has supported keeping rates steady so far this year. However, in response to rising inflation caused by supply chain disruptions stemming from the Iran war, Cook said she may be open to raising them. The rate of annual inflation has remained above the Fed's 2% target since 2021. In May, the Labor Department's gauge hit 4.2%, and the Commerce Department's metric climbed to 4.1%. After 5 years of above-target inflation, I am particularly attuned to the risk that elevated inflation will become embedded in price and wage-setting behavior, Cook said. May 27 at Stanford's Institute for Economic Policy Research. As such, I am prepared to raise rates if the expected disinflation does not appear in a timely manner. For now, the committee's target range remains at a range of 3.5 to 3.75. The decision comes after the Department of Justice ended its investigation into Powell and the Fed in April, after Senator Thom Tillis, Republican from North Carolina, cited it as the reason that he was holding up new Fed Chair Kevin Warsh's confirmation. That investigation, which Powell and other former Fed chairs condemned, was tied to the budget for multi-billion-dollar renovations projects at the central bank's Washington headquarters. Honestly, I won't feel comfortable about the Fed's independence until we get another president. And a lot of it is because this guy has been so vocal and unabashed about what he wants. This from Gabenga Ejlor, chief economist at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. I have never seen such a targeted attack on an institution like this president. After the DOJ dropped the probe, U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Janine Pirro, said the Inspector General for the Federal Reserve would look into the building costs overrun instead. Warsh said, June 17th, he expects the Inspector General's report this summer and that he determined whether the project should be handled differently to be good stewards of taxpayer money.
Seniors fret they'll outlive savings. From Daniel Devise of USA Today, American retirees are likely to outlive their savings. According to a new report, surveys have shown that Americans fear running out of money in retirement more than they fear death itself. People are living longer, which means retirement lasts longer, and retirement costs are rising. A new report from Care Scout, the long-term care network, finds that the average American at age 65 faces a retirement shortfall of $109,000. That's the difference between how much income they can expect from Social Security, savings, and other sources, and how much they can expect to spend on the expenses of daily life. The report draws on state-level estimates of life expectancy at age 65, 16 to 20 years more or less, depending on the state, and average retirement benefits, median net worth, and expected retirement expenses. Retirees typically rely on Social Security to cover many of their expenses, along with retirement savings. Social Security benefits don't run out, but savings can. That's why many Americans speak of a need for $1 million or more in savings to fund a retirement that could stretch 30 or 40 years. Not surprisingly, seniors are more likely to outlive their savings in states with notoriously high living costs, including New York. By contrast, retirees enjoy a financial edge in such states as Minnesota, Utah, and Colorado, where residents enjoy high retirement income and expenses that are relatively manageable. The average senior in New York can expect about $1.18 million in expenses and $721,000 in income in retirement, which is a projected shortfall of $471,000. It says, don't want to outlive your savings? And here are some tips from experts. Don't underestimate how long you will live. Maximize your retirement savings and claim Social Security later.
You've been listening to a reading of articles from USA Today for Thursday, July the 2nd, 2026, on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. We will return for more readings after the short break. Your readers today,
Jim Duffy
and Ken Drost.
If you're listening to this publication online, you're probably using our website, a podcast player like Spotify or iTunes, a streaming service like Siro, or a smart speaker. Did you know that we now have a dedicated app that can be downloaded to any mobile device, like a smartphone or tablet, for free? App users can conveniently access our live stream and any episode of our podcast easier than ever. To download the app, just type NFRRS in the search window in the Apple App Store or in the Google Play Store. Contact us anytime if you have any questions by calling 716-821-5555, extension 5. Thank you.
continue now with our reading of articles from today's issue of USA Today. Your readers are
Ken Drost.
and Jim Duffy. And turning to our sports page, LeBron's legacy with the Lakers is secure, no matter what comes next. From Scooby Axon, a columnist of USA Today. Now that LeBron James has decided his basketball future by opting not to spend the 9th season with the Los Angeles Lakers, it's fitting to reassess his time in the City of Angels, which was sometimes spectacular and other times a disappointing failure. In the past, whenever James has made any free agent decision, it has set the course for the rest of the NBA's roster construction. It has been long rumored that James had his sights on a 5th ring, and any version of getting him on a super team that can get that done would suit him just fine. It certainly isn't about the money, as the Lakers had a $57 million cap hold that James could have easily agreed to. He also could have ridden out of a farewell campaign with his son Bronny, whose salary was guaranteed by the Lakers for this upcoming 2026-27 season. But taking a look back at it, James' Lakers legacy isn't complicated at all. Let's first start with how he announced he was joining the Lakers. It wasn't some made-for-TV spectacle, as when he signed with the Miami Heat in 2010, sparking comical outrage and burned jerseys in Northeast Ohio. James was much more subdued the next time around, giving Sports Illustrated the reasons for his return to the Cleveland Cavaliers. That bet paid off in 2016 when he led the Cavaliers to their first and only NBA championship in an epic 7-game series against the Golden State Warriors. Just 2 years later, he announced he had signed a 4-year, $154 million contract with the Lakers. In a simple statement on social media, James was brought to Los Angeles for one reason, and one reason only: to win a championship. Other reasons why he might have moved to the left coast were as irrelevant as they are now. But when history looks back, every stop James made came with at least one title triumph, including the 2020 season, which was cut short by the worldwide coronavirus pandemic and resumed in the bubble in Orlando, Florida. Critics have tried to downplay that championship because of the nearly impossible circumstances of playing basketball while the world outside the bubble and the NBA were dealing with COVID. Those criticisms are at best silly and at worst bloviation with no logic or thought of common sense. James won his 4th championship just months after the tragic passing of legend Kobe Bryant and brought the Lakers back from the brink of being the league's laughingstock after Bryant retired in 2016. Should James receive a statue outside of Crypto.com Arena or have his number raised to the rafters? That's up to the powers that be with the Lakers. Someone will complain either way if either or both of those things are done. But what James did in his 8 seasons with the Lakers have to be marveled at, especially physically. He averaged 25 or more points per game in 6 of those years, and 24.4 and 20.9 the last 2 years, and set the all-time scoring record in a Lakers uniform. 1 title in 8 seasons is not a failure. He won 1 championship in 11 total seasons in Cleveland, and you don't hear the Cavaliers fans whining about it. As the 41-year-old 4-time MVP and 4-time Finals MVP goes to what could be his final NBA home, the main lesson is that winning a championship at any destination, let alone a place like Los Angeles, where the standards, history, and fan base demanded, is a legacy-defining moment in any book.
Laying down on the job. The free kick strategy features prone players behind the wall. Seth Vertelny of USA Today writes, "You've seen it many times at this World Cup. A player lines up a free kick, and the opponent sets up a wall. Behind the wall, one player is designated to just sort of lie there. What is that player doing? He isn't sneaking in a quick mid-game nap. Instead, he is engaging in a strategy that has become widespread in recent years. We can explain. Let's start with the cardinal rule of a free kick. The defending team must give the opponent taking the kick 10 yards of space. After that, if the free kick is within shooting distance, Typically, a team will set up a wall of players to block off space to shoot. Free kick takers often try to shoot over the wall, threading a difficult needle, high enough to clear the wall, but still low enough to stay on target. With this in mind, the wall often, with this in mind, the wall often jumps when the taker releases the shot. Over time, some free kick takers realized this left a vulnerability. If the wall all jumped, a shooter could sneak his shot under the wall. Many have successfully employed this strategy. So the back and forth continued with the strategy of having a player lie down behind the wall, negating the opportunity to shoot under the wall if it jumps. When did players start lying behind the wall? There had been documented instances of players lying behind the wall before 2018, but the strategy truly became widespread in that year's UEFA Champions League. In a game between Inter and Barcelona that year, Inter's Marcelo Brozovic quickly ran and slid behind the wall right before Barcelona's Luis Suarez took a free kick. The strategy worked to perfection, as Suarez tried to shoot under the wall, but saw his shot deflect off Brozovic's back and out of play. Even Lionel Messi approved. Have Inter Milan discovered a revolutionary football tactic? A BBC article read after the game. Now, since then, the strategy has become increasingly commonplace.
Heated battles, predicting each of the 5 open quarterback starting competitions. From Michael Middlehurst Schwartz of USA Today. As NFL training camps approach in late July, several teams have opted to extend their ongoing quarterback mysteries into the depths of summer. 5 franchises are set to enter training camp with competitions at the position, all varying in degrees of openness and intensity. Yet even though the stakes might not be comparable, each organization has critical work ahead before coming to a definitive conclusion, at least for the start of the season, at the most important position in football. Here is USA Today Sports breakdown of each outstanding quarterback competition. First, the Atlanta Falcons. Tua Tagovailoa versus Michael Penix Jr. And what the Falcons are saying? Since joining the franchise in January, head coach Kevin Stefanski has been cagey about his plans behind center. When asked whether Michael Penix Jr. would be his starter once fully recovered from a torn anterior cruciate ligament suffered last November, the 2-time NFL Coach of the Year said he was not big on giving out positions in February. Though many were ready to name Tua Tagovailoa the starter upon his signing in March, Stefanski has returned to the same tagline, noting that he has no intention to hand out a starting spot at this point in the calendar. Quarterbacks coach Alex Van Pelt said earlier in June that the competition between the two passers wouldn't begin in earnest until Penix, who remained out of 11 on 11 reps throughout the offseason program, was at full strength. Turning to page 4 of the sports page, next is the Minnesota Vikings. Kyler Murray versus J.J. McCarthy. And what the Vikings are saying? When Minnesota signed Kyler Murray in March, many assumed his coronation as the starter would shortly follow. Kevin O'Connell has insisted since then that this is an open competition, a notion he's backed up by keeping an even split in his first-team reps. Murray has cited the 50-50 divide as a complicating factor in getting a handle on the offense, but O'Connell has said he wants to see the process through. Next, the Cleveland Browns. Shedeur Sanders versus Deshaun Watson. And what the Browns are saying? First-time head coach Todd Monken stated at the start of mandatory minicamp that he believes he has 2 starting-level quarterbacks. His remarks not only confirmed second-year passer Dillon Gabriel as the odd man out in the group, but also reinforced how little separation there was between Deshaun Watson and Shedeur Sanders at this point. The former seemed to have a distinct edge at the outset of the off-season program, but Mary Kay Cabot of the Cleveland.com reported that the latter had closed the gap, leaving the two running neck and neck. General Manager Andrew Barry told 92.3 The Fan in Cleveland that Sanders has had an excellent spring and that his growth from his rookie campaign has truly been phenomenal. Next, the Las Vegas Raiders, Fernando Mendoza versus Kirk Cousins. And what they're saying? Months before even taking Fernando Mendoza with the number 1 draft pick, the Raiders made clear they were in no rush to hand him the reins to the offense. That's not an indictment of the Heisman Trophy winner, however, so much as it's facing the reality of the current roster. But while General Manager John Spytek, Coach Clint Kubiak, and part owner Tom Brady have at various points stated their strong preference not to inhibit a prized young passer's early development, the notion took root in reality with the signing of Kirk Cousins. More firewall than full-on mentor, the 37-year-old can help figure out what works and what doesn't in the freshly constructed attack while keeping Mendoza out of the line of fire. Kubiak has said Mendoza has been as advertised, and multiple teammates and assistant coaches have lauded the former Indiana signal caller's inquisitive nature. That might help him absorb the scheme, but it might serve as an additional reason not to fast-track his entry into the lineup. And the Arizona Cardinals. Jacob Brissett versus Gardner Minshew II and Carson Beck. And what the Cardinals are saying. Arizona didn't seem likely to be on this list after waiting until the 3rd round to take Carson Beck. But after Jacoby Brissett remained away from the team during the voluntary portion of the off-season program, it appears as though there's at least an opening for the competition. In May, ESPN reported that Brissett had been informed by the team that he would be their starter. The Cardinals haven't gone public with any such declaration, however, with first-year coach Mike LaFleur saying at the conclusion of mandatory minicamp that he's not really concerned about QB1 right now.
The Clippers mapping out post-Kawhi Leonard era. James H. Williams of USA Today writes, the Los Angeles Clippers have officially moved on from Kawhi Leonard after 7 seasons. Leonard was traded to the Toronto Raptors on June 30 for forward Brandon Ingram, guard Grady Dick, 2 unprotected first-round picks, 2031 and 2033, 2 second-round picks, 2030 and 2033, and a 2027 first-round swap. The move puts an end to a real pursuit of a title for the near future, as the Clippers opt for a younger roster while building assets. Leonard originally came to the Clippers in July of 2019, along with Paul George, in what was a homecoming of sorts, both being Southern California natives. The Oklahoma City Thunder had traded George and a first-round pick to LA for a haul that included Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Danilo Gallinari, 5 first-round picks, and 2 swaps. The duo did lead the Clippers to their first Western Conference Finals appearance in 2021. Still, the pairing didn't pan out, while the Thunder managed to construct a championship-winning roster following the trade, using one of those picks to select Jalen Williams. Despite Leonard's departure, an investigation by the NBA still lingers. Clippers owner Steve Ballmer, Leonard, and his uncle advisor Dennis Robertson were allegedly involved in a no-show agreement with the company, Aspiration, to funnel extra compensation to the player as part of a salary cap circumvention. So here's where things stand for the Clippers, who are looking to reconstruct their roster this season. The Clippers' starting lineup would consist of Darius Garland and rookie Keaton Wagler making up the backcourt. Ingram would join forward Derek Jones Jr. and center Brook Lopez. Ingram is no stranger to Los Angeles, having originally been drafted by the Lakers with the number 2 overall pick in the 2016 draft. He was once viewed as the untouchable asset that the Lakers were going to build a future around. While Lopez did have his team option picked up by the Clippers, The team declined the options for Bogdanovic and Nicholas Batum before the start of free agency. The Clippers also fully guaranteed Chris Dunn's $5.68 million contract for the 26-27 NBA season. Jordan Miller received a qualifying offer, and Kobe Sanders agreed to a new 4-year, $11.2 million deal to return.
You're listening to a reading of today's USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 1:15.
And continuing, Benedict Mathurin would serve as the sixth man after the team extended a qualifying offer to him earlier this week, according to Law Murray of The Athletic. Mathurin averaged 17.6 points and 5.4 rebounds in 54 games last season. And finally, the Clippers still have roster spots to fill. The team will have several options available, including re-signing forward John Collins. Now, he tallied 13.6 points and 5.3 rebounds per game last season in 69 games played. Forward DeMar DeRozan could be considered a veteran target the team will reconsider. He averaged 18.4 points and 4.1 assists in 77 games played for the Sacramento Kings. If center Mitchell Robinson does not return to the New York Knicks, he could be another interesting option for LA to consider. Robinson averaged 5.7 points and 8.8 rebounds in 60 games he played.
Jordan Spieth believes gambling is influencing crowd behavior, from Nick Stavis of Golf Week and the USA Today Network. Aside from Wyndham Clark going wire to wire, the biggest storyline coming out of the 2026 U.S. Open had nothing to do with the golfers. Instead, it was the gallery. Clark played alongside world number one Scottie Scheffler on the Sunday at Shinnecock Hills, where he was met with vitriol from the Long Island crowd, to the point where some fans had to be removed for loudly rooting against the now two-time U.S. champion. Cheers like "Get in the bunker" could be heard on the TV broadcast on nearly every shot Clark hit, and they erupted in joy for seemingly all of his bad shots. It wasn't the first time an unruly crowd has stolen the show at a golf event in the last calendar year. The European Ryder Cup team was berated by the gallery at Bethpage Black, while hundreds of fans in attendance at the Players' Championship outwardly rooted against Englishman Matt Fitzpatrick down the stretch on Sunday. The same thing happened to Fitzpatrick when he defeated Scheffler in a playoff at the RBC Heritage a few months later. But the subject in each of those examples is a foreign golfer playing on American soil. Wyndham Clark is an American player who was on his way to winning his National Open. Why did the crowd express such hate for him? It's no secret that Clark is a rather polarizing figure in golf. His reputation took a big hit when he damaged lockers inside the clubhouse at the revered Oakmont Country Club after missing the cut at the 2025 U.S. Open. But was there something else that led to the nasty reception he got in the final round at Shinnecock? Three-time major champion Jordan Spieth thinks so. "I think you had some unique circumstances there," Spieth said while speaking to the media ahead of this week's John Deere Classic. "I think the one thing that I'll point out is I do think that betting in golf is something that's going to have to be tackled here soon. Because I don't know how much of, say, the Wyndham scenario was the fact that it was enticing to bet the field versus Wyndham on Sunday in a legalized betting state. And you could have had people out there that are essentially, have $100 to $10,000, depending on who it is, on the field versus somebody else." Just last week, ESPN reported that the Major League Baseball Players Association proposed a ban on player props being available to gamblers, citing ongoing harassment coming from people who lose bets. A lot of that harassment is done online or amid a loud crowd of thousands of people. But golf is much more intimate. Fans in attendance can easily influence results by yelling something at the wrong time, and security can't throw them out until they're already done so. In golf, it's tricky because you could actually impact the outcome if you wanted to. It may not last very long, but you could impact a shot if you wanted to, Spieth said. I don't know of another sport that you could impact as a fan like you can golf. So I don't know how much that's having to do with it. If it's different than it used to be. Spieth's main point is not new, but it's getting worse. I've also played rounds with guys who were not treated well 10, 15 years ago. I don't think it's a crazy new thing. I do think the Bethpage Ryder Cup was, from what I understand, maybe a lingering effect from that with an American versus European. You know, Cam Young, Fitzpatrick, the players. I'm trying to single them out for you, but I wasn't a part of either one of them. But I will say that from what I've seen, a lot of times it has to do with betting, and that is in the last 5 years. We'll see what happens with that.
Haaland, Norway book matchup with Brazil. The article is pre-titled "Looking Back, Ahead." It's a feature article by unspecifically USA Today. Erling Haaland's 86th minute tap-in goal was the difference in Norway's 2-1 win over Ivory Coast in the World Cup's round of 32. Now, Ivory Coast tied the score at 1-1 in the 74th minute on a ridiculous run by super sub-attacker Amad Diallo, who carved through the defense before netting the equalizer on June 30. But it was a brilliant entry pass from Oscar Bob to Sander Berge and then Haaland to secure the result in the final minute. Norway led 1-0 at halftime, courtesy of a left-footed strike from winger Antonio Nusa in the 39th minute. It's a devastating loss for Ivory Coast, which had numerous scoring chances, but was not quite able to net more than one goal. Norway now faces Brazil on June the 5th. Now, Spain marches into its World Cup last 32 clash against Austria on July 2nd on the back of an unbeaten run of 34 matches, a defense yet to be breached, and an old question still nagging away. What happens when all that possession runs into a locked door? Luis de la Fuente's European champions face Ralf Rangnick's Austria, which is making its first World Cup knockout appearance in 44 years after finishing runners-up in Group J. The Spaniards topped Group H with 2 wins and a draw, taking 7 points out of 9. It was progress, but not perfection. Spain has looked secure at the back, with goalkeeper Unai Simon having gone 429 minutes without conceding a goal. Yet the opening 0-0 draw against Cape Verde offered a warning that control alone may not be enough. Against one of the tournament's debutants, Spain had 74 possession and 27 shots, but only 7 were on target. Austria is expected to use a low block and daring Spain to break the deadlock. Portugal and talisman Cristiano Ronaldo will look to quiet critics of an underwhelming World Cup run in their round of 32 on July 2nd in Toronto, when they meet a Croatian side that has made a habit of outperforming. The match potentially marks the end of an era, with the 41-year-old Ronaldo and Croatia's 40-year-old midfielder Luka Modric looking to finally experience World Cup glory. For Portugal, it's time to step up following performances that raised concerns over coach Roberto Martinez's ability to fire a team boasting an array of riches all over the pitch, including PSG's Vitinha, Joao Neves, and Nuno Mendes. Croatia is no strangers to a slow start, including at the 2022 World Cup, where it reached the semifinals with 2 goalless group stage draws, back-to-back penalty shootouts, and a single victory in open play against Canada. Portugal are an excellent team, with many world-class players in every line. This from Nicola Vlasic. We will analyze them well and prepare as best we can, but it is clear how dangerous they are. As we respect them, they respect us. I think the details will decide the winner. And finally, reaching the round of 16 has become something of a habit for Switzerland, and the Swiss will aim to do so again when they face Algeria July 2nd in Vancouver as the North Africans chase a first knockout stage victory. Competing at their sixth successive World Cup, Switzerland's consistency in qualifying has been matched by the predictability of their exits. The Swiss were eliminated at that stage in 2006, 2014, 18, and 2022, and a group stage exit in 2010 remains the lone exception. Back at the World Cup for the first time since 2014, Algeria's Fennec Foxes advanced as one of the tournament's best third-place teams after a thrilling 3-3 draw with Austria. At age 35, Captain Riyad Mahrez remains Algeria's defining force, contributing 2 goals and an assist.
In an article regarding the WNBA, Stewart is MVP after Liberty wins the Commissioner's Cup. From Sydney Henderson and Mitchell Northam, USA Today staffers, New York Liberty guard Sabrina Ionescu called game in the WNBA Commissioner's Cup Championship over the Las Vegas Aces on June 30th. The Liberty defeated the Aces 93-85 in front of their fans at Barclays Center in Brooklyn to become the first 2-time Commissioner's Cup champs since the in-season tournament began in 2021. New York led by as many as 17 points, but the Aces went on a run to take the lead with 7 minutes and 25 seconds left, all without 4-time MVP Aja Wilson in the lineup. The Liberty responded with a 24-14 run, capped by a deep 3-point dagger from Ionescu with 16.8 seconds remaining. Breanna Stewart was named Commissioner's Cup MVP with 25 points, 11 rebounds, and 4 assists. But she said Ionescu is equally worthy and deemed her co-MVP. I was just telling Ionescu she deserves this too. We can share it. Come on, let's share it. Ionescu finished with a team-high 26 points, 5 assists, and 5 rebounds. Pauline Astier added 15 points and 5 rebounds, as in the Liberty's second matchup versus the Aces in a week. The Aces' Jackie Young scored 25 of her 31 points after halftime, and Shanendy Carter added 18 points off the bench. Thomas calls out the WNBA silence. From Phoenix, Phoenix Mercury forward Alyssa Thomas is calling on the WNBA and Commissioner Kathy Engelbert to take action after she was on the receiving end of death threats and online abuse following her suspension. The WNBA handed Thomas a 1-game suspension for recklessly making contact with Caitlin Clark's throat during the Mercury's 111-109 win over the Indiana Fever on June 24th. Thomas said the league failed to reach out to her about the suspension or in the aftermath of the on-court incident. We still have yet to hear anything from Kathy Engelbert. It's no surprise, Thomas said after practice on June 30th. You can see what's being said on social media, but as usual, she remains silent, and that's unfortunate when our lives are being threatened. The league has to do better. Following Thomas's comments, Engelbert issued a statement that says the league vehemently condemns any and all forms of hate. The safety and well-being of everyone in our community is always the league's top priority, Engelbert said in a statement. We are aware of Alyssa Thomas's comments, and what she and her teammates have experienced is completely unacceptable and not representative of the WNBA community. The league and our security team have been in contact with the Phoenix Mercury organization and remain committed to protecting all players. You're listening to a reading of today's USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 1:30.
Moving into the life section, a television exclusive. ABC's Muir makes a rare climb for America's 250th. Ralphie Aversa, of USA Today writes, David Muir has gone where very few people have gone before, the very top of the Statue of Liberty. For ABC's coverage of America's 250th birthday, the World News Tonight anchor, age 52, took a cameraman along as he climbed to the top of Lady Liberty's torch, a very high and exclusive perch on the statue that stands over 300 feet in the air. The torch has been closed since 1916. During an exclusive phone interview with USA Today, alongside ABC colleagues Diane Sawyer and Deborah Roberts, Muir recalls the climb, with the final stretch up the narrow 40-foot ladder to the torch, and the question he posed to the park ranger who was guiding him. How many people are allowed up here? Muir recalls asking, to which the park ranger replied, nobody. Climbing the ladder itself was more terrifying than standing on the platform, Muir said, noting he had an immediate response when his cameraman asked him if he wanted to go up a second time to film it from a different angle. You just hear the audio of me saying, I'm not going back down. We're not doing this twice. When asked if Muir needed a break during his 300-foot climb, Sawyer, aged 80, interrupts. Have you met David Muir? She quips, eliciting laughter from Muir and Roberts, who's 65. Do you think he needed a break? Heights and physical challenges aside, Muir says the moment was a poignant one. Once you are up there, you are just in complete awe of the beauty of New York Harbor, he says, and you immediately think of the people who came into the harbor on those ships and thought, I'm getting a chance at a new life. As the nation prepares to celebrate its birthday, Muir, Roberts, and Sawyer, and many of their Disney colleagues set out to showcase the stories that have shaped our country. The company is celebrating the moment with a full day of programming in conjunction with ABC, ABC News, ESPN, and National Geographic. Muir will lead the coverage, which includes everything from the aforementioned feature at the Statue of Liberty on July 3rd, and also with Roberts and musical guest Brandi Carlile, to the annual July 4th Nathan's Hot Dog Eating Contest on Coney Island. Muir, Roberts, and Sawyer will also join other ABC colleagues in Wonders of America, July 4th between 1 and 3 p.m. Eastern Time, providing a look at the country's natural wonders and how they've shaped history. For the special, Muir went to the Grand Canyon and the Redwoods National and State Park, while Roberts covered Yellowstone National and Sawyer traveled to the Appalachian Mountains. Roberts, who co-anchors the long-running program 2020 with Muir, calls her time in Yellowstone a magical experience, though the shoot came with its own set of challenges, including rain and unexpected delays. We have to stop and break for bison as we're going along, she recalls. But that's what the raw beauty was in this place. It's hard to believe. It was an assignment. People didn't really believe that this thing existed at the very beginning because of how wondrous it is, Roberts adds. For me, it was just awe-inspiring. Now, as for Sawyer, the longtime anchor, who still contributes to ABC News after handing over the World News Tonight reins to Muir in 2014, found the Appalachian Mountains provided an endless state of surprise. The range, which covers 13 U.S. states and stretches into Canada, has been dubbed a biodiversity highway due to the animals, plants, cuisine, and preservation of original bluegrass and folk songs native to the region. It was an interesting tapestry of America and how it formed us and formed our idea of who we are, in a way, Sawyer says, noting how settlers likely said, if we make it across these mountains, then nothing stops us all the way to the Pacific. I think one of the great joys of this job is when you can bring people something that doesn't need words, she adds. Now, while Muir is filled with gratitude that he and his colleagues were able to tell these stories from different parts of the country, He also jokes about an added benefit from some of their travels. Now, first of all, our phones did not work, which was a real gift. He jokes of his time in the Redwoods. But there was this moment when we were looking up at this tree in front of us and trying to assess how old it was. We realized that all of the trees around us are much older than the Declaration of Independence, older than this country. The steward of Save the Redwoods, an organization that protects and restores the forest, was standing there with me. And he said, and you know what? There will be hundreds of years after us, Muir continues. Other coverage throughout the day includes GMA's 50 States in 50 Weeks, July the 4th from 1:07 a.m. Eastern, and Nashville's Star Spangled Bash, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, hosted by Ryan Seacrest. Muir will also helm Dawn in America, July 4th and 5th. July 4th, 5 a.m. Eastern Time, which traces American history through documents like the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. The First Amendment and freedom of press have long been central to American democracy, but debates over media independence have intensified during the Trump administration, especially as changes at CBS News and 60 Minutes made headlines. As part of his reporting, Muir saw the original first drafts of the Declaration of Independence and Constitution in Philadelphia. He noticed freedom of the press written in the margin of the Constitution, which of course eventually became part of the Bill of Rights, ratified in 1791. It was on the Founding Fathers' minds when they were envisioning the future of this country, he says, to see in the margin that they thought that one of those ways to hold power to account over our 250 years would be freedom of the press, to ask the questions and to be brave. They knew that from the very start.
15 shows that define the American experience, from Kelly Lawler of USA Today. As of July 14th, America has been around for 250 years, and for 80 of those years we've all been watching TV. While the story of our country is being told in a myriad of ways ahead of the anniversary, one way to look back is to see how the medium of television and the shows, stars, and trends and events it created has become a part of our national narrative. We may not all agree on politics or social issues. We may live across thousands of miles of land and sea, and we may be fundamentally different from each other, but we all watch TV. And it's worth reflecting on how all those shows have come to underline our collective experience in America's 250-year history. First, the Ed Sullivan Show on CBS from 1948 through 1971. Variety and talk were the name of the game when TV first became entertainment in the United States, and nobody did it better than good old Ed. Ed Sullivan wasn't just good TV. It was TV that changed the course of our popular culture. Just ask the Beatles. Next, I Love Lucy on CBS from 1951 through 57. America's love affair with television was cemented by Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz in this sitcom that aired 180 episodes in the 1950s. The story of the goofy, lovable couple and their normal middle-class lives was mesmerizing and revolutionary when it aired on TV, and was the first show captured on actual film in front of a live studio audience. The Tonight Show on NBC started in 1954 and is still televised. What Steve Allen began in 1954, Jimmy Fallon and Jimmy Kimmel and Seth Meyers and John Oliver and Jon Stewart are trying to keep alive in 2026. The world's longest running talk show, NBC's late night institution, created the late night format, which was perfected and solidified by the late great Johnny Carson's 1962 through 1992 tenure. 60 Minutes on CBS started 1968 and still being showed today. There have been a slew of evening news magazines that have helped Americans understand the world they live in, and 60 Minutes is one of the few shows still on the air, still keeping the stoic, clinical tone to the act of reading the news. It remains a ratings champ resistant to tabloid and other trends, and still influential enough that its recent behind-the-scenes turmoil has become national news. Jeopardy! NBC and syndication, 1964 through the present time. TV is often called the idiot box, criticized for mindless distraction and entertainment. But there is a long tradition of intellectualism and education on our screens that represents the American desire to learn and innovate. The quiz show, the longest running and most prestigious of them all, is Jeopardy! An American institution that never ceases to capture our spirit and desire for knowledge. Next, the Mary Tyler Moore Show on CBS from 1970 through 77. Groundbreaking, impactful, and just plain funny, Mary Tyler Moore's eponymous sitcom about a single career woman is a defining show about American second wave feminism and one of the greatest shows to grace our screens. All in the Family on CBS from 1971 through 79. Norman Lear, legend of the small screen, did one thing better than any other TV producer then or since. He opened our eyes to parts of America we hadn't seen before. Of all his brilliant shows, Family exemplifies this broadening of our collective horizons through its diverse characters. Close-minded greatest generation patriarch Archie, played by Carol O'Connor, the Black Jeffersons next door, and counterculture poster boy Meathead, played by Rob Reiner.
MASH, CBS, 1972-1983. The classic sitcom, set at an army hospital during the Korean War, lasted far longer than the conflict it portrayed. A snapshot of the 1970s culture and humor, though it took place in the 50s. The deeply funny and popular series was both a show about America and one that brought us together. 106 million people tuned into the finale episode. These days, only the Super Bowl can bring that many viewers together. Saturday Night Live, NBC, 1975 to the present. The counterculture of the baby boomers came roaring onto TV with Lorne Michaels' sketch comedy series that has been an institution on NBC Saturday nights for 51 years. SNL has always tried, with mixed success, to capture the current American moment. The Cosby Show, 1984 through 1992. Now, Bill Cosby may have a sordid reputation in modern times, but in the 80s, his TV show was a revolutionary and subversive representation of Black Americans as middle class, educated, and just like everyone else. Hugely popular and influential, TV in America would not be the same without it. Next, Friends, NBC, 1994 through 2004. For 10 years, America was nothing without our friends. The attractive and magnetic six-some of Monica, played by Courtney Cox, Rachel, played by Jennifer Aniston, Phoebe, Lisa Kudrow, Ross, played by David Schwimmer, Joey, Matt LeBlanc, and Chandler, played by Matthew Perry. They created a phenomenon drinking giant cups of coffee in their shiny corner of New York City. Next, The Wire, HBO, 2002 through 2008. Crime, justice, policing, corruption, poverty, desperation, drugs, grief, loss. HBO's seminal The Wire had it all and more. Often considered the greatest TV show of all time, including by this TV critic, Wire is the most important and accurate series about our often imperfect criminal justice system and all the machinations on both sides of the law. Next, American Idol, Fox and ABC, between 2002 to 2016, and then picking up again 2018 through present. Reality TV and reality TV competitions. They're just another genre in 2026. But in the early 2000s, they were a revolutionary development in what TV could be. CBS's Survivor kicked off the competition genre, specifically in 2000, but it exploded with Idol in 2002. A perfect amalgamation of American obsession with celebrity, TV, music, bullying, Cinderella stories, and democracy. Next, NCIS. On CBS from 2003 till present. There are good guys and bad guys in the world of NCIS, and the good guys represent everything America valued when it premiered in 2003. In the Iraq War era, when cars all over the country bore yellow "Support Our Troops" ribbons, NCIS glorified our military, our sense of justice, and American exceptionalism in the precise way to meet the moment. And finally, The Pit, HBO Max, in 2025 through the present. It's not an exaggeration to say that HBO Max's Emmy darling is the best show about the way we live now. Debuting in 2025 and not missing a beat in its 2026 second season, the medical drama is the very first TV show to capture the post-pandemic era of America. Yes, it tackles big political and social issues like ICE, vaccines, masking, abortion, health insurance, and racial tension. But it also perfectly captures our national sense of burnout and dread, of waking up after we've all learned that the world could change and stop on the heels of a virus or a war.
You're listening to a reading of today's USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio reading service. The time is 1:47. And returning to the sports section for this article, Sorsby sought refuge, but the NFL closed the door. From Chris Umbaka of USA Today. Had the NFL not thrown up the caution flag regarding quarterback Brendan Sorsby's entrance to the league, his next dropback could have preceded the most dastardly questions that can be asked of a professional athlete. Did he do it because it was the right play? Did he do it because he relapsed? Those were the questions that came to mind from Matthew Wine, who runs the newsletter Secure Stakes and operates a consultancy that services technology, national security, and sports-focused clients. Sorby's litigious escapade, which he finally abandoned on June 29th following the revelation he gambled on college football while playing, and the NFL subsequently denying him entry into the supplemental draft, offers an illustration of the rapid changes taking place across the gambling industry, college sports eligibility rules, and integrity issues. The rules, governance, and institutions at the collegiate level have not kept up, Wine said, and while the NFL flexes control over the situation. This is a real-world example that took place in the span of 3 weeks or so, Wine said, that really sort of puts a really fine point on it. Enough people within the league office and around the NFL, according to Wine, held on to significant questions about how the public would react to any hypothetical involving Sorsby, from throwing the ball away on third down to a certain number of rushing yards he pursued. It struck me that there were luckily enough people that had that concern, that they wanted to not necessarily to bar him, but more like, we need to take our time to think through how we're going to do this, Wine said, because in all likelihood, he's not going to be the last person with this issue. The widespread legalization of mobile sports gambling has led to more players being disciplined over integrity concerns. In April of 2024, the league reinstated 5 players who had previously served indefinite suspensions for gambling on the NFL while members of the league. Detroit Lions receiver Jameson Williams received a 6-game ban for gambling on other sports while at the team facility. And Tennessee Titans wideout Calvin Ridley was another high-profile player who sat out a year in 2022 for placing bets on his former team, the Atlanta Falcons, despite being away from the team at the time. No NFL players were suspended for gambling during the 2024 season, the league said prior to the start of the 2025 campaign. Wine, whose background is in policy, doesn't think Sorsby's saga will result in drastic rule changes or guideline adjustments. It is best, he said, to avoid altering any long-standing position based on one case or instance. You want to try and be strategic in how you set rules and parameters and governance structures, Wine said. I suspect it will cause the NFL to, internally put some thought into how do we address this if and when Sorsby applies to enter the 2027 NFL draft, and what rules need to be in place for him or other athletes like him. Players in the NBA and Major League Baseball have also received lifetime bans for influencing wager results. No matter the league or scenario, whether it's Sorsby or the federal indictments that rocked the NBA in October of last year, Wine continues to see a troubling pattern of gambling enforcement. You find the bad guy, you punish him, you ban him from the league, you deal with it, and you move on, Wine said, and everyone sort of forgets about it until it happens again. In the cybersecurity industry, Wine said, breaches were dealt with similarly with cyclic processes that never end. Only more recently have governments and corporations begun taking more systemic approaches. I think sports is similar, Wine said. We focus on these individual events and the story arcs that go along with them. And once it's over, we sort of move on to the next thing, and we don't take stock of, what part are the parts of the system that allowed for this to happen, and how do we fix those parts of the system? Information sharing between the various stakeholders, leagues, sports books, venues, players, and fans is one area of improvement Wine would like to see. Fantastic Sports Books and Casino has partnered with IC360 to help ban people who threaten players for gambling-related reasons. That's a solid first step, Wine said, but it's not enough. The Sorsby situation was simply the latest test in the NCAA's power, Holden said. What's left of it, he added. That left the NFL to exert its own.
And continuing in the section, from immigrant to hero, Quinones pushes Mexico. John Arnold of USA Today writes, it was a moment that seemed significant, but not one that would change the course of Mexican soccer history. Julian Quinones proved to be a better soccer player than an actor in a clip made for social media in which he gave his biographical details and said chilaquiles are his favorite food. But the important part came at the end. When asked nationality, Quinones said Mexican. Quinones, a proud immigrant from Colombia who arrived in Mexico as a teenager to play in Tigres youth system and stayed for nearly a decade, would suit up for El Tri. Immigrant journeys are familiar to nearly every Mexican. Most people know somebody who has gone to El Gabacho to work, sending money back to their families. Quinones' story is different, with Mexico the destination that allowed him to provide for his family and reach his goals, but he identifies with the American dream. There are people who go to the United States to look for a better life, and that should be applauded. That's sacrifice, he said June 30, after scoring for Mexico in a 2-0 win over Ecuador. Just like I did, there are people who are doing the same, little by little, and you have to value that. They should never feel less than for looking for the best for their family, the best for them. No one should tell them they cannot do it. Quinones isn't listening to any haters. He may end up not just being a Mexico international, but becoming the Mexican with the most goals ever scored at the World Cup. His goal Tuesday night was his third of the tournament. That puts him at level all-time with Mexico legends Rafa Marquez and Cuauhtemoc Blanco, and a goal away from tying Chicharito and Luis El Matador Hernandez, who each scored 4. Quinones also assisted Raul Jimenez on the second goal, capping a blistering start from Mexico that overwhelmed an Ecuador defense that seemed stunned by the way El Tri was connecting passes. Those passes often ended up on the foot of Quinones, who showed on the goal how he can surge forward with the ball on his foot and become nearly impossible to stop, but also put together several impressive combinations. Few expected him to be such a key contributor for L3, yet his early goal against South Africa in the World Cup opener meant more chances that he has been able to make the most of in front of goal. Life is always like that, right? You fight and you fight until you get what you want, he said. I'm taking advantage of the opportunity as best as I can.
You've been listening to a reading of USA Today for Thursday, July 2nd, 2026 on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. We read USA Today weekdays at noon. For more information, call 821-5555. Your readers today have been
Ken Drost.
and Jim Duffy.
If you know, shop at any of the Dash's supermarkets, please save Dash's register tapes for radio reading. Our agency receives $2 for every $100 in Dash's register tapes. Radio reading has raised thousands of dollars so far. Anyone can drop off their Dash's tapes to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, between William and Clinton Streets. Or Dash's tapes can be mailed to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, New York, 14227. Any questions on Dash's tapes for radio reading? Call us at 716-821-5555, and thanks for caring.
Tomorrow is the 3rd of July, and because the 4th is on a Saturday, the offices of the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service will be closed in observance of the holiday. Our programming will be a little different. Our morning Buffalo News reading, obviously we won't be here to do it, but we will be broadcasting the Thursday morning edition of the USA of the Buffalo News. At noon, the Buffalo News this past Sunday had a special section called Buffalo News America 250. It's on, you guessed it, America's 250. At 1, we have History Magazine from our friends at Mind's Eye. At 4 o'clock, in place of our rebroadcast of the news in the afternoon, we have the Thomas Jefferson Hour with America at 2:50. At 5 o'clock, we Person, Place, Thing, talking to a couple historians about the history and the Revolution. And at 5:30, we have Looking Back, an assortment of history articles from our friends at Virginia Voice. The rest of our programming tomorrow will be the same. However, on Saturday, at 10 o'clock Saturday night, we'll be broadcasting our Old Time Radio Holiday Special with 6 episodes of The Bob Hope Show. Stay with us for these readings and more.
following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability